Let's talk about CSS. Historically speaking, it's been very complicated to perform visual effects on our web applications. If you are old enough, you will remember in the 90s and even in this century, you remember Flash. When you hover a menu, you get this very fancy effect with a drop down, yeah, draining your battery life just to display the menu, accordion, things like that. That was Flash, right? Thankfully, Flash is not there anymore, and thankfully, now we can perform very nice and efficient animations only using CSS. And this is what I would like to talk today. So when talking about animations, we are generally speaking thinking about stuff moving around on the screen. A menu, yeah. So for instance, if I quickly go to the Codery platform, we don't have many, but things like this panel is animated, right? Technically speaking, there are two techniques. So one is actually called animations, but another one is called, does anyone know the alternative to animations in CSS? Transitions, correct. So I'm going to solve the same problem, first of all using transitions and then using animations, and we'll see the differences between them. All right, so back to my code editor. So I got a template tab as usual, there is nothing on it. So let me get rid of everything. So I'm just going to display a box. Can you see the screen? Hopefully you can, right? So let me display a box, div class name box, and then some basic message, hello, right? And now on my CSS, can anyone tell me how do I now change the style of my hello element? Dot box, fantastic. Dot box, right? So with dot box, let's set up some properties. For instance, background color, yellow, yeah? Width 100 pixels, and then height 100 pixels. So let's see if it works. It works, right? It's a bit small, but we got our sexy square, yellow square. All right, so now I want to change the dimensions of the box. Whenever I hover the box, I want to double its size. Instead of 100 by 100, it will be 200 by 200. Technically speaking, that wouldn't be the double, that would be 4 times bigger. But anyway, I want to make the box larger, right? So can anyone tell me how do you capture the mouse over effect in CSS? Dot box, 2 dots, hover. Fantastic, that's correct. That's the way you say, hey, for every box that is hover, means the cursor is on top, then do whatever you want, right? So let me change the dimensions of our box. Something like that, right? Now, it works, it's great. It's great, however, it's a bit aggressive, right? Because it moves from 100 to 200 immediately. It would be fantastic to see the flow, 110, 20, and then vice versa, right? So, how do we solve the problem with transitions? It's pretty simple, actually. The beautifulness about transitions is the simplicity. With transitions, you can do that. Transition, colon, and then which property in CSS do we want to interpolate? So first of all, let's talk about the width. That's the property that will be dynamic. And now, next property is what type of transition do we want to apply? We'll see in a minute. For now, let's talk about the basics. Linear. You're going to understand that very easily in a second. And then finally, how long the transitions take to complete. Yeah? Instead of 0, at the moment it's 0, right? It's immediate. So for instance, let's talk about 1 second, 1s. Let me get rid of the height for now, because otherwise it's going to be a bit confusing. Only the width. I only want to change the width. In other words, without the transition, Yeah, that's without the transition. With the transition, you see, it's nice, right? Hope you agree with me that your application becomes more sexy with this type of things, right? Okay, so what linear means? At the moment, the transition runs at constant speed. Yeah, so it doesn't accelerate, it doesn't decelerate, it doesn't slow down. Yeah, immediate speed and then it stops immediately. But imagine that you are driving a car. That's not the way you drive a car. When you accelerate, you don't go from 0 to full speed immediately, and then you have a Tesla Model S, right? Generally speaking, you accelerate, and when you find a dog or a pedestrian, generally speaking, you stop the car, right? It takes a while. So the speed does like that. So this is what in CSS we call easing. So you type ease, and that may be a bit hard to see, but if you pay attention, you will see the speed is dynamic. And if you don't fully trust me, let me show you something quite interesting. Imagine that my speed is 0.2 seconds. Yeah? That's the speed we want to have. And it's very fast. But how do we know if the transition type is being applied or not? Let's open DevTools. You remember DevTools? Right click, inspect. There is something pretty nice about animations and transitions in DevTools. You can see here at the bottom, there is something called animations, right? If I click on it, I can, for instance, slow the animations down. You see, set the speed 100%, 25, or 10%. And what that implies, let's have a look. So, question for you. If the animation at full speed takes 0.2 of a second, how long will it take to complete at 10% speed?
2 seconds.
Fantastic. Look. And I hope you can see here that the speed is not constant, right? It's easing. And actually, look, that's pretty cool as well. So Google Chrome is recording all the transitions, all the animations, right? So you can replay them. I think this is pretty nice. How long will it take to complete at 25% speed? 0.8, correct, yeah? So if at full speed it takes 0.2 of a second, at 25% speed, it will take 4 times more. Does it make sense? Am I speaking Chinese now? Basic maths? Hello? When you were 10 years old? Yeah? I'm not hearing anything.
Makes sense. It makes sense.
All right, cool. So that's the way you deal with transitions. Let's talk about the height. Do you think that just by enabling a default height and a hover height, the height will be animated as well? Yes or no? No. Look. Oh, what's going on? All right. Thank you, breakpoints, for nothing. All right. Oh, you see? The width is animated, but the height is definitely not animated. Right? Technically speaking, you can have here a wildcard. You can animate all. And it works. I'm not a big fan of that technique. Why? Because transitions are not for free. When you set up a transition, that implies that the browser is going to be listening on any changes on that particular property. If you set all, the browser will be listening on every single supported CSS property. That's not efficient at all. If I only want to animate the width and the height, you can do that. Look, that's the width, right? So I can pass a comma separated list of properties that I want to animate. And of course, they may have different attributes. One may take 0.2 of a second, the other one may take 0.4 of a second, whatever. Yeah? You see? Now, it's the same result, but it's much more performant. Look, so for instance, I may have a different speed for the height. So if I run it again, you see? Because it's very fast, it's a bit hard to see. But if I slow it down, you will see that it will complete the width, and then it finishes the height. And vice versa.
Sorry, what is that? Why does it
You tell me? Why the width finishes quicker?
Sorry.
Because I set the duration of the height animation to 0.4 of a second. So likewise, if I move my cursor out of the box, which transition will finish earlier, the width or the height? The width, correct? Look, width, and then eventually the height. Does it make sense? So that's pretty much it about transitions. You see how simple they are, right? So if something can be managed using a transition, go for it, because there is nothing simpler than a transition. However, the reason why we have something called animations, that I'm going to explain in a minute, is because transitions have some limitations. So transitions only interpolate values between A and B. If the default width is 100 and the hover width is 200, can we interpolate from 100 to 200? Yes, 101, 102, 103. Can we interpolate colors, guys? Can we go from yellow to blue?
Should be.
What do you think?
It's a number code.
You remember when you went back to school, this class of art class where you had to mix colors? Yeah, if you mix yellow and green, you get blue. I just made that up. I don't remember the combinations, but you remember you can mix colors, right? So colors can be enumerated. Let's do the test. So background color yellow. On hover, my background color is going to be blue. Yep. So then, yes, correct. So I need to change that to background color, right? Background color. All right, so let's see background. Did I type it right? Yes. Let's see if it changes. Whoa, yeah. Does work. So what happens if I want to go from white to black? That's easier, right? It should go through some sort of gray scale, right? Here you go, see? All right, so once again, with transitions, we can interpolate values. Can we interpolate, let me rephrase that. How can I hide the box? Using display. None, correct. And how do I show it? Block, correct. Display block. So let's see if it works. So the box will be hidden by default. Oh, why doesn't it work? What is my box?
Not enumerable. It doesn't have like the enumerable value.
No, wrong. I'm not trying to animate anything. Ignore the animations. I just have a hidden box. So whenever I hover it, the box should become bold, solid. Why it doesn't work, guys?
Still white.
Still white.
No, it's.
Okay. Good point. Now it's red. Still not there.
It's not there, simply. So you cannot cover something that it's not
That's correct, Darius. When we say display none, it's not there, right? Because it's not there, can we hover something that is not there? No. No, right? So that's not the way it works. However, there is something similar to display none. You may have heard about that, called visibility hidden. Visibility hidden is similar to display none, but the element it's still there. It's just transparent.
It takes the space.
It takes the space. That's correct. Exactly. And then visibility visible. Yeah. So let's see what happened now. Still not there. It doesn't like it neither, right? So we cannot apply it neither. That's the complexity of transitions, right? That we need to be careful with this type of properties. So, can anyone tell me how to solve the problem? I like that. Opacity. Opacity 0, and then opacity what? That people get often confused with that. 1. It's not 0 to 100. It's 0 to 1. So now, look, it's there finally. So now, it's making the trick. Yeah, it works. Can we animate the opacity? Once again, can we interpolate something between 0 and 1? Yes, we can, right? So, transition, opacity, and now, oh wait, it's still loading. Let's give me a second. Here you go, you see? Which is pretty nice, right? So, 2 things to note here. First of all, we need to be careful. With transitions, we can only work with properties that can be interpolated. Numbers. And colors as well. Yeah, but colors are numbers at the end of the day, right? Numeric properties. We cannot change, for instance, the font family, right? Can we change from font family Verdana to Times New Roman? That doesn't really make any sense, right? We cannot do that for sure. All right. The second limitation of transitions is they only react to something. So something must happen to trigger a transition. Then we need an action. What's the action here? Use mouse hover, that's the action. Yeah. Could also be click on a button, yeah, whatever. But there is dependency. Something needs to happen to trigger. In other words, can I trigger that sexy effect when I refresh the page using a transition? Not really. Not really. Not really. I cannot do that, right? Some people may be thinking, can I set opacity 0? Can I do something like that? You see my point, right? No, that doesn't really make sense, right? So unfortunately, with transitions, we cannot deal with this problem. And that's the reason why we have animations. Yeah? So first of all, let's solve the same problem using an animation. So back to my width and height box. You remember? So I got background color yellow, blah, blah, blah. So I want to change the size of the box when I hover it. We did that before already, right? So in here, we can set up some animation properties. We need to set up at least 3 properties. First of all, at least 2, not 3. First of all, the name of the animation. Animation name. We'll see in a minute what that means. I like to call that show, for instance. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, I can put Brexit here. That's okay. The second property is the duration of the animation, which is pretty expected, right? Animation duration, 1 second. And now, that's the minimum we need to do. So what do we need to do with that show? We need to define something called the keyframes. So the keyframes, keyframes space hello show. Yeah. So here we can specify the states of our animation. If you are used to work with Adobe multimedia software like Premiere, Pinnacle, Macromedia, Flash, it's the same principle. You set up states and then you decide what happened on each state. So we can do something like that. From and then to. You see my point? Obviously, I want to increase the size of the box. So let's see what happened when we run this example. Looks good, right? Looks good, looks good. Ah! What the hell? What happened? Let me play at full speed. Say again, Sophia? Correct. That's a weird behavior under my point of view of CSS. By default, animations are reverted at the end. You see, we go to the end, pop, and then we revert them. Never really understood why that's the default behavior, because this is unlikely to be the desired use case. 99% of the time, you don't want to revert the animation. Imagine the code menu. Every time you open it, well, it closes automatically. It's a horrible user experience, right? But hey, it's what it is. So, to prevent from that ugly situation, we had to add a new property called animation fill mode. Forwards. That means once you complete it, stay like that. Don't revert anything. And if I try again, you see? Now it goes in one direction. Does it make sense? So, before I said that with transitions, we have to trigger an action, like mouse hover, which is what we are doing here as well. So if that was my goal, in reality, there is no point of using an animation. If the only thing I wanted to do is to expand the box on hover over, there is no point of using an animation because transitions are much simpler. So what's the advantage of animations here? That we can trigger the very same sexy effect on load. As soon as we refresh the page, I want that to happen automatically. How do we do that? Well, easy. Look, I move all these properties here. Okay? So as soon as the page renders, apply the animation. Let's see if that works. I refresh. Oh, that's it. It works. You see? I refresh. Oh. I don't have to hover over the box anymore. Any questions? No? So, even though to me that looks correct, let me ask you something. What happens if our UX specialist is asking to change the default size of the box from 100 pixels to 75, width and height? How many lines of code do we have to change? 4, that's correct. If I want to change the size of my box, width and height, from 100 to 75, I need to change these 2 lines plus these 2 lines. That's not efficient, right? Why I need to change the same thing 4 times? So can we get rid of that bit here? What do you think? All right, let's see if it works. Correct, it works. As soon as I refresh, the animation runs. So I hope you agree with me that we don't need that. Coding is about reusing stuff. We try to avoid duplication as much as possible. But if I manage to convince you that that's the correct way of proceeding, let me show you the problem of this approach. What happens if, once again, our UX designer believes that even though the animation is sexy enough, it happens too quickly. We don't want to present that animation as soon as the page loads. We want to wait a bit. Do you know how can we postpone the execution of the animation?
Add a delay.
Correct, add a delay. How do we get a delay? Animation delay. 2 seconds, for instance. That means the animation won't run until 22 seconds? Why 22? 2 seconds. Yes, 2 seconds. So let's try again. Look, this is going to be interesting. Let's see what happens. Refresh now. Oh. Let's try again. Refresh now. Can anyone tell me what the hell is going on?
So we are missing default values. Just inheriting from the block.
That's correct. Because we commented that out, the box doesn't have any default width and height. Because that from block will only trigger once the animation starts. Because of that, I personally prefer to deal with this problem on the other way around. In other words, I pretty much never have from block. I always do that. Why? Because now my box has some default dimensions. And then, if I have any animation, then fine, after 2 seconds, or 3 seconds or whatever, the size will change. So if I refresh again, 1, 2, go for it. You see? Let's try again. 1, 2, easy. Any questions?
Can you do percentages instead of from the two?
Of course. Can we interpolate percentages? Of course we can, right? So we can do width 20%, height 20%, eventually width 100% and height 100%. So hopefully, well, let's see what happens, because that may be controversial. But let's see what happens first. Oh, you see, I was right. I was controversial. Something is going on, definitely. Yeah? Look, so by default, it's a bit small. Actually, let's a little bit slow it down. Let me refresh. So by default, it's 20%, which is correct. And then, after 2 seconds, that in reality, how many seconds are we waiting now, guys? So after 20 unnecessary long seconds, it will start spreading. But look, here you go. You see? Loading bar, progress. But only the width, not the height. Why? That's interesting, right? Why one property works but not the other? Whenever you got that issue, I strongly suggest you to inspect the DOM. And this happens because, as hopefully you can see, the parent element, you see, is only that height, only has that height. Because of that, the child element, 100% means 100% of the parent height. If the parent height is only 18 pixels, the child will be 18 pixels, right? So obviously we can play with that. We can play with that by changing the default height of all the elements. But that's a bit, I don't want to do that now because it's a bit beyond the scope of this session. But going one by one, see, if I go one by one over each element, and eventually I change them all, eventually our box will be as big as the screen is. Yeah? Again, that's everything related to the content of the workshop. But of course, we can play with percentages. As far as we can enumerate numbers from 0 to 100%, then it's all good. Yeah.
Can you do percentage of the keyframes as well instead of having from and to?
That's actually my next point. Yes. So at the moment we only got two states, right? It's actually the initial state and the end state. And actually with transitions, that's the way it works. Yeah? You have two states, and then transition works in between. With animations, we can have much better control. For instance, rather than having from and to, we can have numbers, as Wesley said. So we can say at 20%, let me go back to pixels because I think it's a bit easier to follow. So at 20%, change the width and the height to 200 pixels. At 100%, then do something huge, right? So you can, and of course you can set up multiple keyframes, as many as you want. So that will probably do something weird, right? That will have default box of 100 pixels, then it will get to be bigger. And then let me get rid of the animation delay, otherwise we're going to wait forever, right? So 200, then 100, then it will explode, right? It will become massive. So let's see if it works. So, where is it? Oh, sorry. Let me try again. Here you go. Oh, sorry. It's a bit. Yeah. You see? Let me try again. So 200, 100, and then yeah. So definitely you can set up multiple keyframes. Does it make sense? All right. So yes, two.
It's 20%, 30%, and 100 of the animation duration, right?
Correct. That's a good question, actually. That number is based on that number. So how long will it take to reach that speed trap? 0.2 seconds, correct. And if we run the animation at 10% speed, how long will it take to reach that speed trap? Correct. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, this is obviously based on the animation duration. So two more things. First of all, Google Chrome has massively improved support for animations and transitions. So let me show you something else. And I need to go back to transitions. So sorry for this sort of jump between one and the other. So let me just quickly show you something we did before. I was actually the first example. Probably you remember that I changed the width and the height, right? Let's see if it works. And then I'll show you something. So by default, we got 100 pixels, and when we hover, we got 200. Why it takes longer the height? Should take the same time, right? Let me refresh. Maybe it didn't refresh at all. Here you go. Yeah, that's fine. So we've been talking about linear, ease, but there are many different types of complex transitions. And how can we play with them? Look, if I select my box, on my element explorer, I can see the styles that apply, right? You remember that. So we can play with the styles. But also, I can click here and I can play around with more complex animation types. See, that's pretty cool, right? So that will create some sort of bouncing effect. So the same thing applies to width and height. Okay? Something like that. See? So now, if I hover the box, whoa, you see? It's pretty cool, right? What happens if I refresh the page? Will my sexy bouncing animation persist or not? No, remember, this is just browser prototyping. So if I really like this transition, if I believe that thanks to the transition, I'm going to be in a good position to get an offer of 1,200 a day, what I need to do is to persist it, right? And how do we persist it? Well, just copy it, and then you have to paste it here. So even though it's a bit weird, that's the way it works, right? So now, if I refresh the page, the bouncing transition is persisted. One more thing. If you ever do that, please add a comment explaining what the hell is that. Yeah? I'm not a big fan of comments. I don't used to like them, unless there is a good reason. To me, that's a good reason. If I need to review a pull request, what the hell that means? Can anyone understand what that means without playing? If you play with it, you say, all right, it's a bouncing animation. But if you don't play with it, it's almost impossible, unless you are very, 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 very experienced, to know what is that, how that translates into a web browser. So if you ever do that, please add something like this is a bouncing transition. If not, that piece of code to me will be not acceptable. Does it make sense? All right, so very last thing of the day, talking about animations and transitions. So some of you may be working on your portfolio, or even if you're creating new apps. Yeah, I mean, of course, you can create transition animation by yourself, that's all good. But generally speaking, in the long term, you tend to reuse libraries of animations and transitions. Unless you want to do something very fine-grained, very special, you know, the majority of the time you just want to slide things, to fade things, pretty basic stuff, right? So actually, the Codir is a good example. So if you go to the bootcamp part of the platform, there are many, you see, many animations, many transitions. So I didn't create the majority of these, to be honest with you. I'm just using a library. That's what I would like to show you now. Some of them are pretty smart, actually, some of these animations. Look at this book you'll play, right? If you want to get the attention of the students, if I refresh, hopefully, yeah, you see? It's a bit bright, but, well, you see? It's doing a fancy effect. So I didn't create that by myself. Why? Because there is something pretty cool called animate.css. So with that library, you can perform dozens of very nice animations very easily, very easily. So let's use it. The very first thing we need to do is to install it. How do we install it? Well, you got all the documentation here. If you go to the GitHub repo, it explains all the steps and everything. So the very first thing is install it. So you know you can install new plugins into your app. It's copying and pasting that command into your terminal. So if I open my terminal, view terminal, many bootcampers have the same question now. Why it doesn't work? I cannot type anything on my terminal. Why? Correct, the server is running. That terminal is busy, but I can open a new terminal. You see that plus button that everyone ignores because of a reason? Is there for a good reason, right? If I click on it, now I have my server and then my fresh terminal. So I can install it. Yeah? And once I installed it already, right? So I'm not going to wait until the process finishes. Anyway, once you install it, then what? Then we need to do a couple of things. First of all, we need to import it. Only once, actually, in your main app.js, right? Import animate.css. And once you do that, that's pretty much it, actually. If you follow the documentations, it explains all the type of effects that you can apply, right? Full example. me just copy and paste that. So let me get rid of my hello box. You see? Let's see if it works, and then we'll analyze the details. So let me refresh. Here you go. You see? When I refresh, you see the bouncing effect? After 2 seconds, it bounces. Yep. You can apply multiple styles here. Just go to the documentation, heartbeat. Let's try heartbeat. Yeah, capital B, right? All right, so let's try this one. Let's see if it works. Here you go, you see? It's a bit weird, but it works. So what can we see here? What do we need? We need, first of all, the animated class. That's the way the library understands that we're trying to play with it, right? Then infinite, depending on whether you want to run the animation once or forever. Infinite means it's forever. But if I remove it, it will run how many times, guys?
The duration of the return.
Yeah, but how many times will it run?
How is it called? Infinite.
Infinite. If I remove infinite, how many times the animation will run? How many? No. If I remove the, if I have the infinite tag, how many times will it run? Say it again? All right, I know it's Monday, I know you drank a lot on the weekend, but let's try to concentrate, right? It's my last question of the day. If I have, imagine you are Alice in Wonderland, right? If Alice in Wonderland has a tag in the HTML called infinite, how many times the animation will run? 1, 2, 3, or infinite? Oh, such a coincidence, right? Cannot believe it, but that's true. And what if I remove it? How many times will it run? Only one, that's correct. It will be weird if it will run infinite as well, right? Then what's the point of that tag? And the last one is delay 2s. Can anyone figure out what delay 2s implies? Correct. It will mean that it will wait steady for 2 seconds, and after 2 seconds, it will trigger the animation, right? So look, if I refresh, 1, 2, then it runs. What happened? I know no one is going to understand this question, but what happened if I, instead of 2s, I put 1s? 1 second, incredible, yeah? That's correct. Look, if I refresh, 1 second, right? And what happened finally if I delete it? Correct. It will run the animation immediately. So if I refresh, oh, that's it. So as you can see, the API, which is CSS based or attribute based, better to say, is pretty straightforward. It's really cool, right? So I would like to invite you to play with it because I find it particularly convenient. And that's it, guys. Any final questions?
Does anyone ever use transforms in animations?
Transform. Whoa, but that's yes, but that's a separate story.
Yeah.
That's a separate story. So there is So there is, for instance, there's a new property in CSS called transform. So with transform, you can apply multiple advanced stuff to your CSS, like filtering. You know these images that are grayed out, and when you hover the image, it gets full color. Or when you sometimes you hover a box and then you get some zooming. You know when you join the international challenge, when you select the flag of your country, you got like a zooming effect. So this was a transform effect. Yeah. So transform effects can also be interpolated using transitions. So yeah, that's the same thing, right? If I say that the scale of my application is 1, And when I hover, the scale is 2, I can interpolate it because it's just moving from number 1 to number 2. So yeah, that's all good.
The transform's quite complicated to understand.
I don't think it's complicated, but it's beyond the scope of this session. We may need another workshop just to explain transform. All right, anything else? No?
At what point is the animation? So you put a delay on 1 second, 2 seconds, at what point is it start? Is it delaying that part? Is it 1 second after everything's loaded on the page, or is it 1 second after a particular element?
So 1 second after the element is visible. If the element is visible straight away, it will be 1 second after refreshing the page. What happens, for instance, if the element is hidden and you show it when you press a button? 1 second after you press the button. Correct. So it's 1 second after the element is available. Anything else? No? All right. So that was it, guys. Thank you for watching.